welcome to God in Film, the podcast where a Christian and an atheist dive into the best that cinema has to offer and see if we can find any parallels with the gospel or any other Bible stories. I'm literary critic and Starfleet captain gone rogue, Giles Goff.
And I'm librarian and filthy mutineer, Julia Hall.
And today, continuing with Season 7 of this lockdown project that got out of hand, we'll be looking at Star Trek Discovery, the 7th Star Trek series and the first one of the modern television era. We'll be looking at science coexisting with faith, what should Christians do if aliens exist, and which Old Testament character Michael Burnham reminds us of. Julia, I introduced you to this show, and I think you might have gotten a little bit invested.
Yeah, so this is technically like my first proper real foray into Trek.
Love
so it. I've seen like the odd episode largely of, is it Voyager that has Captain Janeway as the main? Yeah, so I've seen like the odd episode of Voyager. So this is like my first proper sit down and watch Trek stuff like start to finish.
Yeah. In the interest of full transparency, I said, here's the show. Here's the episodes you need to watch. There's one from season 1, one from season 2, and one in season 5 if you feel you can fit it in. And Julia's like, okay, all right.
The season 1 was like third episode. So it's okay, yeah, I'll just watch 1 and 2 till give me into 3. And then I was like, okay, this is bomb. This is really cool.
Now it's time for Julia's Facts.
Ta-da! As we know, Star Trek Discovery is a television series that ran from 2017 to 2024. It's created by Brian Fuller and Alex Kurtzman, although I believe Brian Fuller actually had to leave production either not long after season 1 kind of was coming out or sort of just before.
Yeah, if you look on the credits for Star Trek Discovery, there are more executive producer credits than there are stars in the sky.
There's a lot.
You get an EP credit, you get an EP credit, everybody gets an EP credit, you know.
But Brian Fuller being one of the masterminds behind Hannibal, which already piqued my interest because Hannibal is incredible.
Yeah.
So before this, you've got Enterprise, and then you've got Discovery, then it's the original series, and then from there out is the normal timeline in which it appeared.
Did you find anything out about Discovery's registration number?
No, actually. Although I think, by the sounds of it, you did.
So it's NCC 1031. And Brian Fuller obviously did Hannibal, but the original idea for it would be like a Star Trek horror story, effectively. And there's that, if you remember with the tardigrade, there's that one episode where they're on the sort of ship like Discovery that is all dark. And the Klingon that is there, and the Klingon like shushes them at one point. So it was meant to be like Star Trek horror, Star Trek sort of Halloween episodes. And if you think about it, in American terms, 10/31 would be 31st of October. So that's
cute.
Halloween. So that's where that came from.
So Paul Stamets, the Commander Paul Stamets, who of course is the pioneer of the spore drive, is actually named for a real-life mycologist. Is that how you say it? A studier of fungi, also called Paul Stamets, who I had no idea existed until this present time. But from the looks of it, he's like the David Attenborough of fungus, and he's done a bunch of different documentaries and stuff like that, just on mushrooms, which is cool. Imagine being that cool that you have someone named after you, literally name for name in Star Trek.
Yeah.
So each Star Trek series will introduce at least one new alien race, usually as part of the main cast. So obviously, OG Star Trek had Vulcans with Spock. The Next Generation introduced Betazoids and androids. Deep Space Nine introduced us to changelings. Voyager, we got Talaxians, a camper, and holograms.
Yep.
Enterprise, we got the Denobulans. Denobulans?
Yes.
However that's pronounced.
Freaky swingers, Denobulans. Yeah.
And then, of course, we got Kelpians in Star Trek Discovery, and I'm obsessed with Doug Jones anyway. I think he is incredible and severely. I'm glad to see him in a starring role where he is like front and center and not just creepy monster number 1. Fish monster number 5, like he got agency in this, which I really appreciate.
I am one of those people that once somebody turns up in Star Trek, then they're on my radar, and I'll know them in everything they've been and everything else. Like Doug Jones ends up playing Saru in this, and has such an amazing, such a beautiful evolution as a character. And then you find out that Doug Jones has been flipping everywhere.
Yeah, if you don't know who this is, you do. Shape of Water.
You know the tall guy that looked creepy? That was him.
He's Billy in Hocus Pocus. He's one of the gentlemen in
Buffy.
But anything Guillermo del Toro has done, he's in that. So he's the Fawn, he's the Pale Man. He's all of the ghosts in Crimson Peak, which is a film that I adore. He's Abe Sapien in the Hellboy films, the OG ones with Ron Perlman, everywhere.
He's already ridiculously tall, and they gave him basically high heels for this.
Yeah, and not only are they high heels, it's like the Lady Gaga, like heelless high heels. That's all. The things that Doug Jones does for his art, because I can barely walk in heels with heels on them. Never mind heels that have no heel, and it's just basically a toe platform so that you're on tiptoes and having to adjust your weight in a certain. I cannot imagine, and it took me honestly longer than I'm willing to admit to notice that he was not wearing shoes.
The patriarchy has a lot to answer for, and making women basically walk on stilts, I think, is one of them.
Yeah, they look nice, sure, but like at what cost? I've got two more. Jason Isaacs, who plays Captain Lorca, who
I love.
We shouldn't, because he's like technically bad, but I love him.
I was so sad when he turned out to be spoiler alert evil.
Like that twist was so twisty, though.
That twist was the twistiest. That was a proper Twizzler twistiness.
And the setup had actually been set up in such a way that you're like, oh, this is an actual twist that was thought of at the start, and
not just something that got
just like,
in.
But what if,
One of the things that was promoted with Disco would be that it would be about the first officer rather than the captain, and you'd get to watch the first officer's evolution. So you knew that the captain probably might not be staying around for the whole thing, but damn, there's that line from episode 3. What he says, something like universal law is for peasants, but context is for kings. I say that all the damn time, that context is for kings. It's such a really good line, because I have to have eye drops as well. Seeing somebody in the future who had to have eye drops, I'm like, oh yes, I found a captain who I can do business with, and and then you have that moment of, wait, hang on. Am I evil and from a mirror timeline? Because
I've been rooting for the baddies the whole time, but then I think it's hidden so well because obviously, it is Starfleet at war. We are having to make tough decisions for the needs of the many, and we can't sort of, ooh, we're going to discover a planet. Ooh, we're going to, do nice things. We're going to, we're going to have party episode with the Ferengi. It's we're at war.
Most mirror universe episodes are a little bit like, hey, let's all be evil and sexy. Let's get our skin tight costumes on and just tone it down, Michelle.
Tone it down, Michelle. Okay,
tone it down.
But it really
you've been warned.
Made me appreciate, especially when she's playing Terran Philippa Georgiou, and then briefly dips back into our Philippa Georgiou when she's pretending. The subtlety you don't realize until you see them literally next to each other, and she's just so good. Stop it.
Chef's kiss, no notes.
Chef's kiss, no notes. Other than you need to just calm down a bit. Let
save some sexy for the rest of us.
Yeah, come on, man. You're just stealing it all. But apparently Jason Isaacs ad-libbed a sort of a for God's sake onto the end of one of his lines. And the writer politely reminded him that there's sort of not really a god or like kind of a monotheistic religion in Star Trek at this point.
Yeah. It's so stupid, that line. The that we can't say for God's sake. So hang on. Do humans say it? Have humans said it?
Yeah, I say for God's sake quite often.
Yeah. You had people in the 19th century or even in the 20th century saying things like, by Jupiter. And it's not like an alt universe where God never existed. Because if you did that, you'd have to take out any reference to God from anything. Even the word goodbye we get from
God be with ye.
God be with ye. you know?
But this is broken because I think Carl Urban says, oh, for God's sake, this, and by God, quite often in his
Yeah.
Star Trek films. And it does come up in Discovery, the officer they find on the asteroid who's basically like keeping it together kind of with duct tape and hope.
Jet
Jet
Reno.
Reno,
That's the
yes.
name of the yeah,
I think
right.
she's mentions God. So I'm not sure why they were picking on Jason Isaac specifically, but I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe on Terra, God was never a thing. The last one is sort of a bit of a hark back to OG Star Trek, but
Hmm.
so Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on the original series, was going to leave after season one because she wanted to go and pursue stage acting and musical theatre and that kind of thing. And it wasn't until she was talked to by none other than Martin Luther King, Dr. King himself, who went, "You absolutely cannot leave Star
Yeah.
Trek. You don't know, what you're doing." And in a BBC Radio Times interview with Sonequa Martin Green, she basically went, "Yeah, it's because of her that I'm here, quote, without her there is no me." And it's crazy for me to think, for Dr. King sat up watching Star Trek. Apparently it's the only television show that he would let his kids stay up and watch. And that's just it's it feels like they're things that don't overlap, but actually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
But they do,
it's
yeah. No, I
Yeah, no,
totally
but
get that.
that one was quite special, I think, because Star Trek, all the people now who are like, when did Star Trek get political? Pay attention. Star Trek was political from the beginning.
Yeah.
From the
From the
beginning.
jump. The unaired pilot has a woman as the
Mm.
second in command, let's go on with it, guys. Yeah, and do you know the Whoopi Goldberg
Yes, yes. There's a black lady on
TV she's
TV and she ain't
locally,
no
yeah,
maid. Yeah,
yeah,
but then it's just it's things like that are so important. And in that
yeah.
same BBC Radio Times interview, I think it was Michelle Yeoh talking about how actually you've got somewhat quite central to the Discovery core. You've got two women. You've got Giorgio and Burnham, who are and women in general in
Hmm.
the show. They don't compete with each other. It's completely
Yeah,
collaborative. They're able to support each other and build each other, and they're not being pitted against each other, which is also quite nice.
yeah.
Yeah, that's all my facts. My facts have factored.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Julia. Thank you so much. Hey guys, it's Editing Charles here, and we've just dropped our U2 bonus episode on our Patreon page. In it, I hear from a minister and U2 superfan, Reverend Tim Edworthy, who talks us through his 40-year fandom with the greatest Christian rock band that never was. I'm also joined by the host of the RE podcast, Louisa Jane Smith, who loves the band so much she actually did her dissertation on them. Here's a clip.
In some ways, again, like a lot of people of my age who were brought up in the Christian faith, U2 became something of the soundtrack to my life, and probably helped me explore the Christian faith more deeply through the lyrics. And there's always this thing, I think, whenever U2 brings out a new album, well, whenever, I hope they will bring out a new album. It's been 7 years since the last studio album, but those two are of a sort of religious disposition will be poring over the lyrics and seeing where are the God references, where are the Jesus references, however tenuous they are, and very often they're not that tenuous, but and seeing what that's saying about Bono's faith in particular, but maybe other members of the band too.
If you want to hear the full episode, you can go to www.patreon.com/God in Film podcast and sign up to our Bishop Waller Bridge tier. You can also check out our God in Gaming episode. We have longer, extended cuts of interviews and uncut episodes on there where you'll hear it first and in full. Now, for this next guest, I was really chuffed to get him on the podcast. He's really knowledgeable, really passionate about Star Trek, and he writes like micro fan fiction in a way that will become your headcanon immediately. I will let him introduce himself.
Hey, my name is Chris Chaplin, and I am an educator in Florida, and I am a lifelong Star Trek fan. Was born in '87, the year that Next Generation came out. I don't know a world without Picard and Data. Grew up on the TOS films. Voyager, TNG are my sweet spots for Star Trek. And also another sweet spot is theology. sometimes combining the two in these little micro treks on Twitter.
Chris, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate it. So let's get into it with Discovery. Obviously, Discovery is quite a auspicious series. It's the first one to come out after Enterprise in
the 2005 to 2017.
Nobody understands how long those 12 years were.
Yeah.
Anyway, how did Discovery come about?
Yeah, 2017 in September, Discovery dropped on CBS, and the first episode, The Vulcan Hello, premiered on CBS for free for all to see. And then that episode ended on this major cliffhanger and said, if you want to see more, subscribe to CBS All Access. And so I jumped on that and caught the second part, Battle of the Binary Stars. There was a lot of obviously excitement about Star Trek coming back, trepidation as well, because people that were involved with those Kelvin timeline movies, some of them, Alex Kurtzman being one, were involved in relaunching Star Trek on TV. In all, there was lots of rumors about how this might be an anthology show where it might follow different crews on different starships, which was an interesting idea that I thought would have been a fun concept to explore. Of course, when the show premiered, we started on the Shenzhou and then later got Discovery in 2 episodes later.
Yeah, Discovery doesn't actually turn up until episode 3, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that's probably the nucleus of that rumor that there's multiple ships and multiple crews going on.
I always thought if you took episode 3 and made that the pilot and then made Vulcan Hello and the Battle of the Binary Stars like a flashback episode, it would have had way more sort of whack to it, because you're watching those first 2 episodes and it all feels a little bit weird. There was quite a bit of controversy around the Klingons, wasn't there?
Yes, indeed, especially the visual kind of reboot of the Klingons and Starfleet in general, but the Klingons were bald. They were a lot more alien looking. They just didn't resemble Klingons. They were in Klingons in name only until season 2 when they grew hair.
Yeah, there's a very sort of gentle reset in season 2 where it's like, no, guys, we should probably make the Klingons look like Klingons. I know that might sound controversial, but it makes sense, you know. So it's always a bit. It tends to get a bit of a kick in the fan community. Like, Star Trek fans can be wonderful and incredibly toxic at the same time. So, what are some of the controversies surrounding Discovery?
I would characterize most of us as being intensely passionate and protective of this thing that is not just an entertainment product, but informs worldview and ethics. Of course, I believe on its own, it is inadequate to do that, but a lot of my views in life were shaped early on by Picard giving a grand speech.
Yeah.
So with that said, Discovery was tonally very different. Darker in season 1, less speeches in season 1, and when the speeches were happening, there was tears accompanied and lots of whispering. And I say those things with great love for Discovery, but season 1, I wasn't completely on board because there was less exploration of the human condition in a more explicit way. In it, it's more implied and woven narratives throughout these 15 initial episodes in season 1. And so you couldn't really judge it until you saw all of it. Yeah. And once I got to the end, I found myself saying, I see what they were doing. They were looking at Star Trek through antithesis.
Okay. Talk me through that.
Yeah, especially as a TNG, child of Star Trek. It's the bright optimism, the carpet, they zoom off to another world at the end of the episode, and there's no conflict on the crew. So it's pretty utopian.
Yeah.
And Discovery is exploring that by looking at the inverse. Because they're in this darkness of war, by the end they get back to it. But can the ideals of that utopia withstand the darkness of war? And I think that's what that first season is really looking at, as well as for Michael Burnham searching for redemption, even though she doesn't even think she's worthy of redemption and grace. she finds it in the end, and so there's your theology connection.
That side of it hadn't even occurred to me. I am totally going to steal that and expand on that later.
Do it. Do it.
That's brilliant. So it's a funny one because I tend to think of kids these days will never understand what it was like waiting for more Star Trek. That 12-year gap, and of course you might not appreciate this, but before the internet and social media came along, the gap between episodes coming out in America versus coming out over here in the UK was massive. So I would read about these episodes coming out in Star Trek Monthly. You wouldn't actually get to see them for ages until you could maybe buy a VHS of them, and then they might get broadcast later on. You had to buy 2 episodes for $12.99 and just hope that they were good ones. And,
oh man,
what impact would you say that Discovery has had on Trek culture overall?
we have Strange New Worlds, we have Picard, we have Lower Decks, we have Star Trek Prodigy.
Prodigy, I forgot Prodigy.
Oh,
it's such a happy problem to have when you can forget that some episodes are there, some series are there.
it happens to me too, and we have Academy on the horizon as well. So yeah, I think Discovery was a massive success, if measured by the output after it, beyond it. All these other Star Trek series, giving a fitting conclusion to the Picard story and the TNG cast.
Yeah.
That is because of Discovery.
Yeah.
I think Discovery was marred in the beginning by changes in showrunners. Even in season 2, that Red Angel plot is pretty uneven in my mind, but I love the characters. But once you hit into that season 4, I think they find themselves very on solid ground, knowing what they want to do, uncoupled from the 23rd century. Now they're free to do whatever they want in the 32nd century, and we'll continue that in Academy. So I think Discovery will only age better and better with time. Once we're removed from the shock value of that initial, what is this? And it wasn't perfect in the beginning, for sure. There was some stiff acting and writing issues.
The uniforms were the problem for me. I like being able to look at a Starfleet officer and at least know what division they are and what rank they are. And if I can't do that, then I don't know where I am, and I don't know who I am.
Totally agree with you. I like the blue jumpsuits because they look like a good transition from Enterprise's blue jumpsuits. But I want the bright blue, yellow, and red for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper, buddy. So, Julia, that was Chris Chaplin. What do you think?
I totally agree with the uniform thing, because it's also, I need to know, can I get attached to this character, or are they wearing red? Are they safe, before I'm like, oh, this is my new favorite guy now, or is he gonna get killed in the first 5 minutes? I totally get it with the uniform thing.
I just think he came across really passionately and really balanced, because a lot of the discourse online tends towards the hyperbole.
Yeah.
And something's either the best or the worst. And I think I tend to agree with Star Trek Discovery. It's not without its flaws. There can be a po-facedness to it, which can be a little bit oppressive. It doesn't do lighthearted super well.
Yeah, it is always literally the end of the world, or worlds as we know it.
I tell you what, though, the best joke I remember is, did you see in season 2 where Spock turns up with the beard?
Yes.
He's having that argument with Burnham, and it's a really snappy back and forth, boom, 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 boom. And he says, "Do you have any other questions?" She says, "Yes. Do you really think that beard is working for you?"
Yes, yes.
There are certain ways that only your little sister can talk to you.
Yeah.
They have the enough contempt to think they can get away with, and that still sticks with me.
Yeah, no, there's a bit quite later on in season 2, where Michelle Yeoh, Philippa Georgiou, comes down to talk about this plan that they're going to enact, and is basically sort of aggressively flirting with Stamets until he's that he's gay, right? And she's, "Hey, look, man, that whole just interaction was just fun." And then when she's gone, and everyone's like, did that just happen? Is that a thing? I think
flirting is fun, though. This is what nobody really talks about.
Yeah, but no, I get it. You sometimes it's just it's a fun kind of banter that actually is perhaps underutilized.
Yeah. Definitely.
Because I feel like the sort of romance element in Discovery, like Burnham and Ash are very like serious about it. You are my tether,
Yeah.
and we will die for each other and live for each other, and
Yeah.
and one of us slash both of us are severely traumatized and should not be.
All high stakes all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously with Stamets and Culper,
Yeah.
it's they've basically been married for a decade, and they're just brushing their teeth together in
The brushing, yeah, that's the scene that sticks with me as well.
which it is a bit sad that they sort of fell into not fully, but they sort of fell into the bury your gays trope a little bit.
Bury your gays, resurrect your gays, make your gays into a found family with a trans kid,
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
go full tilt on this stuff.
Writers, have your characters flirt with each other a bit more for no good reason other than that they can. And even better, cast Michelle Yeoh to play them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
bonus points if she's in some kind of, leather outfit,
Okay.
Yeah, Discovery is great,
See, this is see the yeah.
I love how there was that one episode with the psychic people, and I'm gonna sound like a complete like absolute uneducated person. I forget what they're called now, but they actually had the previously on, and they actually gave you clips from actual Star Trek.
The dudes with the big heads,
the big brains.
from that's from the cage. That is literally the unaired pilot.
Just to be like, yeah, by the way, we're cluing. The people who know, but the people who don't will clue you in, which I really appreciated. That they were, they're really trying to tie it into to the wider historiography. But I can see why longtime fans of Star Trek won't like it, and I think part of that is because it's flashy and shiny and new and they don't have spore drives in the next generations, like they don't have this and they don't have that, and especially with, I think there's a culture in a lot of fandoms at the moment, speaking as someone who's quite a big Star Wars fan. Yeah, there's just a lot of it's either amazing and really, really good, or it's terrible and you shouldn't waste your time with it. And sometimes that depends on whether the lead is either A, a woman, or B, a person of color, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes things are genuinely bad. Sometimes things are unfairly dissed on because it's not, an exact replica, in every way to what we already know, which
some things you got to hold loosely.
Yeah.
Now it's time for Finding the Faith in the Film.
Bye-bye.
So one of the first things we're going to look at today is Burnham's parallels with one particular Old Testament character, which actually you know quite well. And it's a character from all the way back in Genesis. Would you like to guess?
Who's in Genesis? Which one? Other than God, Noah?
Yeah.
Noah's in there?
It's not Noah.
No.
No. I'll give you a clue. He has his own musical.
Oh, Joseph.
There you go.
I was Joseph once.
Really?
Yeah, it was a summer school and we did the Joseph Coat song. But really, I was only Joseph because I was really tall and, the coat fit me. But I don't care, man. I was Joseph, okay?
Yeah, you got to take your wins where you can find them.
I knew every single word of the musical when I was like 12.
Yeah.
I knew every colour. Like,
the one song I always struggle to remember of that one, it was red and
yellow, green, brown, scarlet, black, ochre, peach, ruby, olive, violet, fawn, lilac, gold, chocolate, mauve, cream, crimson, silver, rose, azure, lemon, russet, grey, purple and white and pink and orange and blue.
Well
done.
Well done. This is in Genesis 37 to 50. I'm not going to read out any of it, frankly, because it'd take way too long. But basically, Joseph is the 11th son and also the favourite son of Jacob / Israel.
Jacob is a bad dad. I'm going to say it.
I'm not going to lie. There are not any good ones in the Old Testament. They all suck. They all suck so hard, But also, Joseph clearly plays into it. Joseph doesn't do himself any favors because he'll say to all his brothers, "Oh, by the way, I had this dream that we all had sheaves and all your sheaves were bound down to my sheave, and I was like above."
And also, my corn was like so cool.
Yeah, I don't know
And
what
go,
that
cool.
dream could mean, possibly, but, And obviously, then they're like, this is the Old Testament. We don't actually care about human rights, so they beat him up and throw him down a well and then sell him. Now, I have had some falling outs with my siblings in my time. At no point has money been exchanged to sell them off to foreigners. Come on, guys, have a word with yourselves, Obviously, he then gets sold into slavery. He becomes a servant in Potiphar's house. His Potiphar's wife takes a little too much of an interest in him.
A little saucy.
She needs to go on a course.
Yeah,
and
workplace management. Okay, you can't be treating your employees like that, even though you're not paying him.
Yeah, absolutely. She accuses him of rape. He's thrown into prison. He effectively picks up a job of interpreting dreams whilst he's in prison. He ends up interpreting the Pharaoh's dream.
Yeah.
And he basically gets promoted to sort of Lord Vizier, effectively, And then he's because he's able to predict the future and things like that, he effectively is able to save up enough grain and save Egypt and some of the surrounding lands from a famine come along. And that basically, that character arc of being from the lowest to the highest is reflected in Michael as well. So Michael, I think it's fair to say, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think she starts off quite arrogant, certainly in the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, I think there's a sureness in that.
It's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I clearly know what I'm doing. Yeah. Yeah, I think
it's that kind of Vulcan arrogance.
Yes, yeah, where it's not necessarily meant to be arrogant, it just is,
Yeah, just kind of comes off that way. And obviously, as a result, she ends up sort of starting the war with the Klingons. So they both start off quite arrogant, and then both of them end up in prison. That's a parallel that's nice and straightforward, And Joseph gets his job interpreting dreams. Michael gets that job as a specialist on Discovery, and for the life of me, I can't remember why Captain Lorca actually recruits her.
Yeah, no, I can't remember what it was now.
So she gets that rank of specialist, which is really interesting because it seems to be, it's like on the level of crewman or maybe even less than crewman.
Yeah,
because she
isn't technically Starfleet for a little while until she agrees to join back in again.
And because from that point she starts off right at the bottom and works her way up, and in the same way that Joseph gets elevated to Vizier, by the time I want to say season 4 rolls around, she's finally made it back to the captain's chair, and she's really earned that by that point. And then I think I actually lost count of the amount of times that she saves the universe. So she definitely saves it in season 2 and possibly season 3 and probably season 4.
Yeah. She is the Buffy of her timeline. Like, she saved the world a lot.
What number apocalypse are we up to now?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
The Winchester boys got nothing on this.
You're like, I'm desperate for the poor girl to have a filler episode where she goes to Riser and just has some freaky fun times.
Yeah, I was quite excited initially for the what ended up being the time loop episode with Harry Mudd, because I was like, oh, party episode, because that's basically like what Discovery really needs every so often is just a beach episode, like where they just have a wind down, like chill time, talk about their feelings. It cannot, the beach part is optional.
Yeah.
But, usually in anime or cartoons, you'll have the beach episode where everyone just, hangs out. That's what and I was like, oh, cool, party episode, beach episode. We'll get some fun. And then it was a time loop, and it was like, oh my God.
There's this lovely kind of parallel between the two of them of just starting off being sort of like hated and despised all the way through to sort of saving the universe or saving the country, or sort of thing. And what's interesting about that is, if you see the Bible as well as being written by each individual book being written by people, if you see it as being divinely inspired as one full text, it's like God is putting in some foreshadowing there. It's like, hey, you know how this guy is the absolute lowest of the low and then gets elevated to the highest possible position. So I'm going to do that again. Because Jesus obviously gets to he is a he's the son of a carpenter, and
he's a refugee.
Exactly, yeah. So this is something that happens in a lot in the Old Testament. There are elements that foreshadow Jesus' life all the way through. You just know where to look and how to look for them. The next thing I wanted to talk about is in season 2. For me, Discovery takes a step up when Captain Pike arrives. He's got the awesome hair. There's that brilliant scene where he says, okay, let's go around the room. Give me your names. Ranks don't matter. And he points out, oh, look, that's where I failed frail physics or whatever it is. So, like the tremendous amount of humility in him. He's like, oh, wow, this is...
He brings that 60s, you know how Kirk was that very suave kind of 60s, that sort of very suave 60s kind of groove, but without any of the problematic bits of like the suave 60s. Like he has that ladies' man vibe without being like a creepy ladies' man.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Which I really, and I think it's also just the way his face is as well. He has that kind of very square jaw and the hair. He just, I think it's a nice touch to go.
We will talk more about Captain Pike when we cover Strange New Worlds in a future season, because we seem to keep coming back to Star Trek. We cannot seem to avoid it, it seems. But the scene I want to talk about is where they're orbiting a planet, I think in the Beta Quadrant, and they're looking down and they see a church down on the surface where there's been this kind of... We talked about it in June. Do you remember the way religions can sort of smoosh together,
Yeah.
Bits of Christianity, bits of Hindu, all kind of gets mushed into the one thing.
Yes.
And there's this brilliant line where Saru, Burnham, and Pike are all talking. They're talking about Arthur C. Clarke's third law. Burnham says, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And then Pike says, theologians reinterpreted it years later as, any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial intelligence is indistinguishable from God. And I thought that was fascinating, because it's really interesting to talk about God in a way where you just shift the register. So instead of talking in spiritual terms and faith and feelings and hearts and emotions, trying to explain the God of the Bible in scientific terminology.
Yeah, he could just be like a little green dude, like somewhere.
So let's have a go at this, because they have got sort of godlike beings in Star Trek all the time, So let's think. So a non-corporeal, non-linear, omnipathic being who identifies as Yahweh and takes credit for the creation of the human race has been orchestrating human history from the beginning and claims to still be orchestrating it all the way up to the end of human history, and it's not explicit that he's lonely, but it does seem to be highly suggestible that he creates human beings because he wants to have a relationship with them, effectively like a parent having children, if you like. Because I was talking about this to somebody recently. God doesn't get impressed by his own stuff. God doesn't look at the Milky Way and he's like, damn, that's a cool Milky Way. God, it's the Milky Way. I made it on day one,
Yeah, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And this is the thing. Like, there was a time, Julia, where doing a Shakespeare play in 48 hours might have seemed impressive to you, and now it's just something you do.
Yeah, three of them under the belt now.
It's no big deal. Whatever.
But it's funny because you go through the same cycle of, oh yeah, I can do this. Oh no, I can't do this. Oh yeah, I can do this, and then it's done.
Yeah.
You're like, oh okay.
So I always feel like God creates human beings so they can see the world and he can appreciate it through their eyes. That's my
yeah, I get you. Yeah.
that's my Gilesian headcanon, that he can see it through their eyes and that sort of thing. When we start talking about the like the Trinity, or this kind of porous 3-in-1 but individual but not thing, that sort of paradox stuff, that is proper science fiction right there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think with the right like reskinning, it's got all the hallmarks of a good like sci-fi,
Yeah.
overlord, three-parted, three-headed
Yeah. You
because three comes up quite a lot in sort of like in spiritual and godly kind of
yeah.
terms. You've got lots of triple goddesses, and Cerberus has got three heads and that kind of stuff. So three is very potent, I think, in general terms.
It did make me think of, if all of a sudden aliens existed and aliens came down, like, how would that affect your faith? Do you know what I mean? How would that change things? And the initial thing would be it might shake your faith because you've not been prepared for this eventuality. But I always tend to think of it in terms of, do you remember when Galileo? Do you remember, like, how Galileo?
Oh my God, me and Galileo, man.
Galileo,
what a guy! Yeah, we went to school together. It was great.
Absolute lad.
He was a mad lad.
But when Galileo said that the Earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around, that was absolute blasphemy. That was complete and total heresy. Do you know what I mean? And they made him recant it and all this stuff. And yet, turns out he was right. Everybody knows he's right and everybody believes he's right. And Christianity survived. Do you know what I mean? It didn't...
Yeah. The leaps and bounds that we've made in technology are... in the last century are quite frightening, really, and
exponential.
There's a lot of Christians still out there who are still very Christian.
You can pray on a hillside, or you can pray on a space station. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't. Yeah. One doesn't negate the other.
Like, I fully believe in aliens. I think aliens definitely exist. I'm not super certain that they've come here. But I'm like, the galaxy, the universe is so vast that I think it's surely more likely than not.
Yeah.
Like, for there to be no aliens at all in the whole universe, to me, seems completely improbable.
So when I think about alien, and again, this is very much highly in the speculative because it's not something you need to worry about too much. But I would think that God loves aliens too, that if he created all life, then he created them as well. And there is, do you know about in C.S. Lewis's Narnia, he said that Aslan isn't an allegory for Jesus. In C.S. Lewis's own headcanon, the idea is that, well, Earth is a planet full of men, so it makes sense that the Son of God would appear as a man, whereas Narnia is a world full of talking animals, so it makes sense that the Son of God would appear as a talking animal to them.
Yeah.
So the way my logic would work, and again, thoroughly into the Gilesian headcanon, but the way my logic would work would be that there would be the Son of God would have appeared to aliens in some other form.
Yeah, in a way that, kind of like a universal translator, right?
Broadly speaking, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and this would be a good example of it. I almost wonder if I'm saying anything heretical, but I don't think I am, because aliens haven't shown up yet. So I don't know, who knows?
As far as I'm aware, aliens haven't shown up.
The crucial thing to think about would be, like, if they did show up, is it actually my job to work out where they fit into God's plan, or is it my job just to love them? And I think Jesus was fairly clear on that whole loving people stuff, So that's what I'm going to do if they show up, and we'll figure it out from there. If they turn out to be the shooty, stabby death row type, we will factor that into our plans. But we'll start off with
Yeah,
love.
we don't want another District 9 on our hands,
Yeah.
really. You know.
Exactly. We'll start off with love as the default and go from there.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to talk about is in season 5 of Star Trek Discovery. We both know Gene Roddenberry has this kind of atheist, humanist version of the future.
Yeah.
But it borders on like a militant atheism where not only does nobody have any faith, but you're stupid if you do. And other people...
Yeah, I think it's very science and logic based.
Yeah.
Which is sort of I think it assumes that science has explained away, anything that could be attributed to religion or spiritualism.
Yeah. And it's very much that sort of thing and it's like it's Gene's vision of the future. It was his sandbox, so those are the rules you had to get in if you wanted to play in it. But when Gene died in 1991, they've pushed the barrier further and further on this one to see where it came. So, for example, in Deep Space Nine, the Bajorans worship the prophets, who it turns out do actually exist and are the wormhole aliens and that sort of thing. The Klingons get their own religion, and there's one bit where, spoiler, but Jadzia dies, and Worf has to go on a quest to make sure she gets into Sto-vo-kor, which is like Klingon Valhalla.
Valhalla, yeah.
And everybody is just, yeah, okay. He says that this is what we need to do to get our friend into Sto-vo-kor, which may or may not exist, but damn, we're going to go along with it anyway. We've had this kind of real evolution from religion is stupid to religion might be okay for other people to where this one kind of lands. Because all of season 2 is that storyline with the Red Angel, isn't it? This angelic figure appearing to people at key points. They can't explain it. They don't understand it. And Whistle Speak, this episode where they land on a planet where people communicate through whistles, and they have to do this kind of marathon run to the top of a mountain, and you find out that the gods of this mountain are actually like some really old-fashioned technology that's been left there. And my hypothesis for this is that the Whistle Speak storyline and the Red Angel are essentially the same story told from different perspectives. Normally, whenever there's, we've gone to this planet and the people worship this thing and they believe in this thing and we know better, that's the way it's always been done. But the Red Angel storyline is brilliant because for once it's the Starfleet crew who are the credulous, the ones who are believing, the ones who don't have the answers and who think it might be. Could it be God? Do we believe in God? It's seeing them have their faith in secularism shaken is really interesting to watch. And like I say, the going to a planet of a pre-warp civilization who still have some kind of religion where somebody ends up getting sacrificed is a tried and tested, well-worn route for Star Trek. But there's something really interesting at the end of the episode, and let me see if I can find it for you. There's this bit where Tilly and Rava are going to sort of suffocate in this place, and if it was Kirk, he would have just destroyed the whole thing and burned it all down, But Burnham appeals to the community's leader, Rava, and she implores him to stop the sacrifices. And he's quite okay with the idea of his child not dying, but he's worried that finding out the temple is an alien artifact will shatter their community. And will their civilization be better off without its faith and traditions? And she's got to reveal to them that they are aliens as well. And she says to him, there is still what you believe. Nothing we've shown you means that gods don't exist. It's just that you know now that there's also us. Beliefs can evolve. Denying that can cause almost as much chaos as the worst storm. And I love that. I love that way of not looking at faith versus religion as like a zero-sum game. You know, that there's
Yeah, it's not, checkmate atheists. You know what I mean? It's
we owned the Christians this time. You know,
yeah.
There's
I was an edgy 14-year-old. I've seen the memes. I've been there.
And it's one of those things that we don't talk about, but faith evolves. Faith can change but it changes over the course of centuries. And sometimes you're like, okay, guys, this is what I believe about God. Can you all please catch up now? That would be great. But yeah, and I think that's okay. I think that's all right. I think you've got your fundamentals, and then everything else is up for grabs.
Yeah. Like, I think if you took sort of a denomination, representative of each denomination of Christianity and sent them back far enough, some of them, if you sent them back far enough, they wouldn't have that denomination community wouldn't exist. I think even if you took a C of E person today and sent them back to, I don't know, like 1750, would they have the same fundamental, would they have the same things in common?
Yeah.
Other than the very basic stuff like, yes, I believe in God, but would they have the same, some of the same fundamental belief systems that these people would have, even though it's the same belief system to a degree?
Yeah.
When it has to evolve with the times, even just from a technology basis, from a scientific basis. But one of my physics teachers at school was I think was an ex-priest, but he was definitely a devout Christian. And he still taught he taught science at school, which is not to say that two are mutually exclusive, but he was very open about the fact that, and I feel bad because I've completely forgotten his name. But no, he was really open with the fact that, I'm a Christian, I believe in God, but I also believe in science, and I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. And it was just really interesting. It was a really interesting way of looking at things, especially from, I'm 14 and I'm an atheist and I'm edgy and I want to check me, you know what I mean?
Cool and down with the kids,
I'm cool, it's God schmod, I'm not like, I'm free, man. I'm a free thinker. I'm impressed by the system,
That must have been really influential. That I bet if you had them trying to force it down your throat, you would have just dug your heels in even more.
It was like, he taught the curriculum, he did everything that that all the other physics teachers and science teachers were doing. It's just that he was, perfectly happy to be like, I'm very religious, It wasn't that he felt the need to preach or anything like that. It was just like, this is just my jam, this is just who I am.
You would expect there to be not many Christians in the sciences, but there's actually plenty of them. It's the social sciences where you find a dearth of Christians, apparently.
I think the more that you look at the world, I think it will push you either one of two ways. You'll either sit there and go, no, this is clearly, something, there is more than heaven and earth a ratio, or you're like, nah. I think it depends on what you see, because sometimes I think it does depend on. I think when you see sometimes the worst of things, you're like, I don't see. But then again, as somebody I talked to who was a nurse for a long time, who worked on cancer wards, was like, actually that part of that really, cemented me into my faith. So I think it is different for everybody.
Yeah. Anyway, we are going to wrap it up there. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have been, thank you so much for listening. We've got a new section. This is the thank you to our patrons section, because there's enough of them to be worth mentioning. Yeah, I know, right? So I would like to extend a big thank you to some of the people who have joined us in the last week. We've got James Pittard, Salma Salah, Miss Sarah Cooper have joined us, along with the Patreon stalwarts of Lance Kane, Natalie Austin, and one Philip J. Coleman, who you may have heard of.
I think, you vaguely rings a bell, maybe,
Thank you so much.
Did he guest one time?
Sometime, yeah. Thank you so much for supporting us, guys. If you can't support us financially, that's okay, but if you can leave us a review, we would be super grateful for that. Julia, would you like to know where in the world some of our listeners are?
I would love to know, because I imagine them all being in England, for some reason.
Okay, yeah. So here's the thing, right? There are a lot in England, there's 2,000, nearly 3,000 downloads in England, and there's only 147 in Wales. So, like, come on, Wales, get your act together, you know?
Come on.
Like, speaking as your favourite son, come on now, you know? In the US, for Delaware was our biggest state for the longest time, but it's been pipped by Virginia and California, who've now got higher download figures than
That's
us.
cool.
It's pretty cool, isn't it? And finally, Maryland, which I tend to because I worked there for one summer, I tend to think of Maryland as like my home state. And
that's like Baltimore is in Maryland.
That's the one, you know? And now we finally got one
like
download there.
Where
So
Edgar Allan Poe lived or something.
Probably something like
I
that,
don't know.
you know. In New South Wales in Australia, we've got like 79 downloads, which is, I think, more than the rest of the country combined. So wherever you are and whoever you are, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it.
Me too.
Get in touch. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what you like about the show. We love to hear from you.
Let us know what you think about the new Klingons. You know, yay or nay? Like,
No,
who's
no.
right?
I will tell you what to think about the new Klingons. I will tell you what to think about them, and you will like it.
Yes, Captain. Sorry, Captain. Aye, Captain.
Okay, that's us done, ladies and gents. Join us next week when we'll be looking at The Mandalorian. Ooh.
I'm so excited for this one.
I thought you might be. Julie, have you had a good time?
I have had a great time.
I'm always happy talking about Star Trek. Okay, ladies and gents, thanks very much. See you next week. Bye.
Bye. God in Film is hosted and created by Giles Goff.
That's me.
Mixing and editing by Giles. Our logo was designed by
Julie Walsh.
And our theme tune was composed by
Rick Lee.
Waffle editing by
Natalie Miniker.
Please rate and review.
Please give us 5 stars because that's a nice thing to do.